Welcome back to the David Watson podcast. And today I had the pleasure of speaking to Bridget for the third time. And today we were talking about how to care for our elderly dogs, get them ready for getting old, and a bit like all of us, who doesn't get old. As always, it was a great conversation. I always appreciate Bridget's time, and I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you. Hello and welcome again to the David Watson podcast. Thank you for coming on. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
I'm good. This is the third time I've had you on now, isn't it?
I know. I'm becoming a regular.
Because you are my favourite subject because it's all about dogs.
It certainly is. There is nothing more to talk about in life than dogs, I feel.
Nothing of value that adds anything to your life.
No, not at all.
How are your dogs?
They're very well, actually. Alfie turns 6 on Sunday, so I must make him a little birthday cake. Oh, they have to have birthday cake. I know. And Mabel was 5 at Christmas, so yeah, they're doing well. They're getting very muddy at the moment, as everybody is out across the fields. But yeah, it's great.
Oh, cool. And have you managed to put any more pressure on hubby to let you have more dogs?
I think he knows that when I decide I'm going to get one, it'll just happen.
Oh, but it's nice you respect him enough to play games with him then.
Yeah. Well, you see, he made this fatal mistake a little while ago. My husband's into drumming, and he had a drum kit, and he wanted to upgrade it, and the upgrade was quite pricey. And he made the mistake of saying, "Well, if you're going to get a puppy, I'm going to get a new drum kit." I'm like, okay, but he's been and bought the drum kit. So I figure now there's no going back, is there?
I mean, he's a married man. How can he come into this like he's new to the game?
Well, it's really funny because a while ago, I think I was going out and I gave the dogs a kiss goodbye and then went to my husband and he said, "You love those dogs more than me." And I just looked at him and I said, "What's your point?"
Yeah. That's a given. That's a given.
Has it really taken you that long to work that one out?
It's just good to have these kind of open conversations, isn't it? So we all know the rules.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I'm very open about it all.
Yeah, and it is. It's just, the family is the nucleus and the centre of my life, and as my husband, you're on the outer ring of that.
He's in the circle. What more can you ask for?
He is the boundary of the circle.
He's there.
It is. One of the things we're specifically today going to talk about older dogs and caring for older dogs. And there were a couple of things that you and I have previously discussed but not got into. And one of them was like when a dog starts going deaf or when a dog starts going blind, little things you can do. But before we get into that, one of the things because I specifically follow you on Facebook, and since we've last spoken, I've noticed a few times you've put up a post about the importance of letting your dog sniff.
Mm-hmm. Yes, incredibly important. So a lot of people, when they take their dog for a walk, get really frustrated because all the dog wants to do is sniff every blade of grass and sniff every lamppost, and you feel like you're not getting anywhere on your walk. But I think what you need to remember is it's the dog's walk, not yours. If you want to go out and walk and get fit, you need to go for a walk and get fit. This is your dog's walk, okay? But dogs' noses are absolutely incredible. They have between 200 million and 300 million scent receptors in their nose. We have 5 million. So it shows how much stronger their sense of smell is. And their nostrils work independently. So they take in masses of different information. And that's how they learn what's going on in their world, by sniffing everything. That's how they interpret stuff. They can tell what other dogs have been in the area, what sex those dogs are, what age those dogs are, whether those dogs are potentially friendly or whether those dogs have got any health issues. They can learn all that just by sniffing a piece of grass. So it's how they interpret what's happening in their world. And it's really, really important mentally for them. It's really engaging and really important. So you know, if you know that your dog is going to be really sniffy on their morning walk, don't plan to do a route that takes half an hour if you really only have half an hour. Plan to do a route that actually would only take 15 minutes and let them sniff. You'll still be out for half an hour. But it's really important for them mentally to be able to engage with their environment and understand what's going on.
Okay, so one of the reasons I asked that is because obviously I was curious. Interestingly, I've started doing something that you just mentioned, is that I now actually have a separate walk that I often do in the evening, and I don't take Molly with me because I like to march and she likes to stop and sniff. So and it wasn't just because of those posts, but that's probably subconsciously where it came from. It was just like I want to get more walking in as part of my exercise routine, and like I said, I want to march like I'm on a route march, and that just doesn't suit Molly in any way, shape, or form. But I'm just much more conscious in the first thing in the morning when I take her out. I used to always call her because there's always these like little clumps of grass that she stops by to smell and sniff. And I'm trying to get round just because I just want to walk round. But since I've seen those posts, I'm just like, all right. So I give her. I am a bit of a clock watcher because I always walk her before I go to work, and it's just like. But I make a conscious decision to be much more patient and just let her have those couple of minutes before I say, come on, we need to move. Because before, what I'd do is I'd just keep walking, and if she didn't follow me, I'd call her. Whereas now I actually stop and just let her have her little couple of minutes, and then like, come on, let's go, and to the next grass clump in the next hedge.
Yeah, it's so important for them because I think we get quite hung up on the fact that our dog has to have an hour of physical exercise a day, and we get very hung up on we need to keep them fit, we need to keep them at the right weight, and all of those things are absolutely important, but their mental well-being is just as important as their physical well-being, and their walk is about their mental stimulation as well as their physical exercise. So it's really important that they can engage with their environment. And I think, even though I know this stuff, sometimes I'm under time pressure. I know that, and I'll be out with the dogs. I'll be like, come on, we've got to go. But over Christmas, especially when I had a little break over Christmas, and I was out walking the dogs, and they were just doing their own thing, and I was just ambling along, a walk that would probably normally take me half an hour to walk if I was walking properly, was taking me over an hour to get out with it. But I loved it because I had no time pressure, and I was just thinking, this is their walk. It doesn't matter. And it kind of re-engaged me with that whole thought process as well, because, even though I know this stuff, we do get caught up in the day job.
Well, that's kind of exactly what happened. Is it made me think, hang on a second, why are you actually going for the walk? And I'm going for the walk because I need to walk my dog. So So stop turning it into a walk for you, and remember it's a walk for your dog. And now I go for a separate walk when I need to walk for me, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. That's perfect.
Yeah. So that was the posts that you were putting on Facebook, and I was just like, so I thought I'll just ask. I didn't realise that dogs had independent noses. I mean, obviously, I kind of knew that sniffing and smells was important to a dog. But like you say, as you amble along in your normal day, you kind of forget why that matters. And like I said, I didn't know they had independent nostrils.
Yeah. So they work so they can take in so much information. And another interesting fact that you may or may not know is every dog's nose print is individual to that dog. So very much like our fingerprints are individual to us, no two dogs will have the same nose print.
I didn't know that. I think you might have actually mentioned that to me before. But that, yeah, because like I say, the thing is, we don't understand we try and understand as people what, like you say, we'll say smells are important to dogs, but we can only have our perception as that is from our understanding of how we smell, which for all other animals is quite bad. We're quite poor of what smelling is, and we don't really, because if you listen to people that do wine and stuff like that, a lot of it, what they talk about is reconnecting the sensors in your nose to your brain because we just don't engage in that practice of smelling and trying to figure out what a smell is and what that smell might mean. But if you listen to wine tasters, when they talk about layers, perfume, I forgot what their proper name is, but people who do perfumes and stuff and aftershaves, again, they start talking about scents in terms of layers, and they talk about it in meanings and depths, you know. And yeah, so when you put that to on the scale of a dog, it's probably beyond anything we can imagine.
Yeah, and if you think sometimes, like if it's been raining, for example, they will sniff even more when you take them out.
She does. Yeah, Molly does.
It heightens the smells. It really brings the smells alive for them when the grass is wet. So instead of actually washing them away, it actually makes them stronger. So you'll find that they'll sniff even more when it's damp and it's wet, because there's so much more stuff to smell. So yeah, they love it. I call it reading the wee mail. They're out there.
Yes. Yeah, they definitely are. They definitely are. Because I do see that with Molly. Sometimes she sort of plows her head, and you can actually hear her physically breathing in through her nose, and you're just like, what is it? Of course, with me, I'm just paranoid that she's trying to eat something, because that's what she does a lot of.
Yeah, they all do that. Mine do. They're terrible. Even if it's not edible, they'll eat it.
This is true. So, elderly dog care. So this is actually starting to come into my life, because recently I've picked up a prescription of Metacam for Molly, because not too frequently, but I just noticed that every now and again she stiffens up. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure if it's weather related, walking related, or just, just whatever. And this came about because unfortunately she had to have an operation on her mouth. And I happened to notice that when she had Metacam, she was really on top form and really sort of peaky. And I was talking to the vet about this, and the vet just sort of said to me that actually she might just be starting to show the early signs of getting older, arthritis, maybe occasionally just get stiff. And after a lot of conversations, it's like, look, why don't we give you a prescription of Metacam, and with no prescribed dose in terms of how many times a week or a day, just if you notice she's stiffening, give her a dose of Metacam in the morning with her food. And for those of you that don't know what Metacam is, it's a kind of canine variation of an ibuprofen, and which is probably the simplest way to explain it. And yeah, and it works. Like I said, I probably don't even give it to her once a week now. But if she's ever stiff, I give it to her, and it just takes years off her.
Yeah, and they do get quite stiff. And the thing to remember with dogs is that they don't show any indication of pain or discomfort until it's actually really sore. They're incredibly good at masking pain. So if a dog starts to show any pain or discomfort, then they really are uncomfortable. But dogs. So how old's Molly now?
I think she's a 9 or 10.
Yeah. So yeah, she's definitely kind of at that age. Dogs actually, even though they're living a lot longer these days, from a physiological point of view, they start to enter senior age at about the age of 7, because changes start to happen in their body from that age. And giant breeds, it's sort of 5, but they start to experience changes. So, for example, their kidneys aren't as efficient as they used to be at breaking down protein. So they will struggle if they have too much protein. But equally, their immune system starts to be less effective, and they need protein to help to build that. But too much protein is bad for the kidneys. So you end up in this real dilemma of balancing out their requirements as they age. And so you do need to be looking at things like their diet, for example, like their lifestyle. So if you do have a dog that has arthritis or gets really stiff, you're much better to take them for 2 or 3 very short walks in a day, rather than one really long walk and then they lay down in the bed or on the sofa all day, because that's going to make the stiffness worse. So there's lots of different things that you can do really from the age of 7 to prepare your dog for older age. And I'm very conscious of this. As I say, Alfie will be 6 at the weekend, and I'm very conscious that we're getting to that point where I need to start thinking about, well, although I'm very conscious about giving him good quality food, is that going to be the right food to take him into his older age? He's already on nutraceuticals like You Move, which are really, really good. But again, nutraceuticals are good to give your dogs before they need them, not because they're not a cure after the event, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So there's lots of things you can do to prepare your dog before they even start to experience these issues around older age, for sure.
So I like, because like I kind of, in the long term, I got fortunate with Molly because being a small Staffordshire as well, she's not a walker. She likes a sort of 20-minute walk in the morning, but if I try and do that 2 or 3 times a day, what you notice is her plodding behind you and the lead just extending, and you end up dragging her around the field. She's once a day. But unfortunately I have a big garden, so when the weather's nice, she likes to just sunbathe. She'll just sit in the sun and cook. And
that's a Staffy thing.
Yeah, and you just watch her staring into the abyss, and she just occasionally smells the air, and she loves sunbathing. She just sits, doesn't even lie down. She just sits there and just kind of half closes her eyes and dozes while sitting upright. And if it's too warm, she just sits in the shade.
Yeah. So I mean, the fact that she can go out in the garden and stretch her legs and things, it is good. But you're right. I mean, if they start lagging behind, or they start sitting down a lot, or sometimes they'll sit down and they'll have an imaginary itch that they got to scratch and things like that. All of those are signs that actually they're tired.
That's how I discovered Molly didn't like long walks. She just led down I went on this walk, and we got about halfway of where I wanted to go, and she just led down and just kind of, we'd only been together a couple of months at that point, and she just kind of gave me this look that sort of said, "You can do what you want, mate. I'm not going anywhere." And she just flat, and she stayed there for about 20 minutes. I didn't try to move her. I was just like, it's a nice day, and I just led down next to her. And then when she got up when she was ready, but it taught me immediately, it's like, okay, this dog isn't for walking.
No, you need to listen to them, especially as they get older. If it's too much for them, they're going to tell you. But going back to your point about teaching them things that can help them if they go blind or deaf, I mean, that is very much things that you can do to prepare your dog for when that happens. Rather than wait until you get a diagnosis that they're going blind, or you get a diagnosis that they're going deaf, because by that point it's really difficult to teach them the coping mechanisms. But you can make it into games and play these games before they end up in that situation, so that if it ever does happen, they've got a coping mechanism that they're comfortable with. So, for example, you can teach a dog left and right. Okay, and that's really easy to do. You can do it from dogs or puppies. You can do it at any age. And you can do it just when you're out on a walk with them and you've got them on the lead. And every time you turn, if you're walking around the houses or whatever, every time you turn, tell them whether you're going left or whether you're going right. And they'll start, as you do that regularly, they'll start to learn what left and right means. And then if they are off the lead, you can then make it a bit more complex. You can play a game with them where if they're running towards you, you can tell them to turn left or right. But you have to remember that you're doing it from the dog's perspective. So the dog's running towards you and you actually want them to go to your left, you've got to say right, because from their perspective, so it makes it more complex for you as well. But it's a fun game to play with them. But, if a dog is starting to go blind, they can use that as a coping mechanism for you to help to guide them, for example, around the furniture, or if you are out on a walk, you can tell them left or tell them right. And it gives them that confidence and that coping mechanism that they can navigate without hurting themselves, because you're using something that they're familiar with, and they understand what it means. So, people always say, if your dog starts to go blind, don't move your furniture around at home. But that's not always practical. What if you have to leave house for some reason, or so actually teaching your dog a different coping mechanism that you can then guide them around the furniture until they get used to where things are, is a really good thing to do. And also zoning the house, for example, you could put different texture mats down at different doorways so that when they walk over that particular texture, they know which room they're going into.
Yeah.
So all of those kind of things can help dogs. But you need to engage with that process before they're really old and starting to go blind. Otherwise, it's much, much more difficult to teach them.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. That does make sense because, like you say, I can, like you say, if you put mats by doorways, like you say, the dog will realise what that is as it enters a room, and like you say, so when it loses sight, there's that familiarity. And what about when dogs are starting to go deaf?
Okay, so again, this is something that you do before, when your dog's a puppy, or at any point. And it's actually really good to incorporate into any other training that you do, but you use hand signals.
Yes.
So you start to teach them hand signals so that they understand what kind of stop means, or what come means, or sort of sit or down. You use different hand signals, but teach them from when they're young so that they associate the verbal cue with a hand signal. And that means that then, even if your dog's maybe quite a long way, away from you over the fields, and you spot something that's dangerous, you can actually use a hand signal that the dog will be able to see to help to keep them safe. But it's really, really useful for dogs that are going deaf, because obviously they're not going to hear verbal cues, but you can use hand signals to work with them in that way. So there are lots of different coping mechanisms, but we do need to make sure we're teaching them early enough to our dogs rather than waiting until the problem occurs, if that makes sense, and making them into a game.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that does make sense. That does make sense, because I think one of the things that's difficult, and I've only experienced this with a cat. I don't know whether it's fortunate or unfortunate, but all of my dogs have kind of, as they've got older, had illnesses or problems that required them to be put down, if that makes sense, rather than they got old. But I had a cat called Squeak that lived until she was 22.
Wow.
Yeah, but it sounds great, but it just isn't, because I'm sure she got senile, and you could tell sometimes she was just distressed because she lost her bearings in the sitting room, and she got very frail. And so I don't have, like I said, I don't really have any experience of looking after an elderly dog, because all of the dogs I've owned, although some of them got to like 11 or 12, maybe even 13, their health deteriorated quickly because of an illness. So it was very much, can this be cured or not? And it was very much, like you said, that they're very good at masking their discomfort. So by the time it became apparent to us, probably it was 2 or 3 vet visits, some tests, and then a decision was normally made, like, actually there isn't anything we can do about this. I have no experience of, like, when I see dogs who are just walking incredibly slowly, what that must be like in the home either, because my dogs have always been bounding around.
Yeah, no, it is difficult. I think if you can proactively, as I say, from the age of 7, have it sort of in your mind that you need to be preparing your dog for a longer, healthier life. I think it then sets you and the dog on a path together for their older age, and it doesn't kind of, might sound a bit silly, but it doesn't kind of creep up on you and you suddenly one day realize they're old. You can actually work with them to keep them, especially if you can keep them mentally stimulated, keep them young. I mean, canine cognitive dysfunction is becoming more and more common, but that's because dogs are living a lot longer than they used to. So it is becoming more common, but you can actually delay the onset. You can't prevent it from happening at some point if your dog lives to the old age, but you can you can do things beforehand to delay the onset of it.
What is canine cognitive dysfunction?
It's like
Is it
Alzheimer's.
like yeah, okay.
Yeah, so it's a similar thing. It's yeah, they lose their marbles.
Because that's actually what kind of happened to my cat Squeak. She, there were times when she clearly had no idea where she was. And it's not just the physical side of watching her get really frail, that she can barely walk. And the thing is that this went on for about 3 or 4 years. And it just slowly got worse and worse to the, there's a point.
It's just...
It is, because it got to the point where she was, and I know we all laugh and joke that our pets just seem to sleep, but she literally just slept. That was it. She was just constantly asleep, really, and you could see her physically over a period of years just waste away from the kind of grace that she once had.
Yeah, I mean, old age is. I mean, it's really sad. It's inevitable, but it is really sad. But there are so many things now, so much that we've learned about dogs that mean that we can try and make their old age more comfortable, and we can try and delay the onset, as I say, of certain conditions. And a lot of it does come down to mental stimulation with dogs, and that is so overlooked. Even in sort of younger dogs, 20 minutes of mental stimulation is just as tiring for them as an hour's walk.
Yeah, I can believe that. I've actually, I don't know what your feelings are on them, but I've got Molly a lick mat now. I mean, just because she will literally spend 30 minutes licking it. I've learned not to put peanut butter on it because it's too hard to clean off. Out of all the nooks and crannies, because like peanut butter is one of her favourites. So I smeared it on there, a little bit of peanut butter on there, and it was great in keeping her occupied. It really was, but it took about an hour and a half to clean.
Stick it in the dishwasher.
I don't have a dishwasher, so.
Right. No, you've got a dog who don't need a dishwasher.
Yeah, that's very true. But yeah, so what other ways? Because like a lick mat for me is a very cheap option of it is you can buy them for less than £5. You can just put anything on them, really.
Mats are great. They are really good. But yes, I mean, you can use those. You can use I don't know if you've ever come across Snuffle Mats. So no. Snuffle Mats they're a similar kind of concept, but they're basically they're obviously a mat, but they're made up of lots of like little bits of material, but you can hide treats in the little nooks and crannies, and then they have to literally snuffle to find out where they are. They're really good. Maybe not for a Staffy if she's like my Staffy, because he's worked out that actually if you pick the mat up and shake it, the treats go everywhere, and then you can just pick them up. It's much easier than snuffling and trying to find them. So for some dogs, Snuffle Mat's not so great. But I mean, really cheap things you can do at home. Like if you've got a cardboard box, you can scrunch up newspaper or scrunch up brown paper, put toilet roll holders and things in there, and hide little treats in there, and just let them get in there and pull it all apart. And it makes a mess, but it doesn't take long to clear up. But they can snuffle around and find the treats that you've hidden in there. That's a really cheap option, and they love it. In the summer, if you've got some flower pots, you could put flower pots out on the lawn upside down, and under a few of them, just hide a few tasty treats under a few of them. So they have to go and snuffle around and upturn the flower pots to find the treats. All of those things are making your dog think and making your dog work. And, that's all good mental stimulation, all of that kind of thing. Chewing is really good for dogs. It's a really good stress relief. So giving them something that they can chew is really good for them. Chewing is their natural way of reducing their own anxiety levels. So if you do have a dog that's a little bit anxious, maybe get some really good chew toys and things for them, because that will help to calm them down a little bit.
What would you suggest for because Molly is not much of a chewer unless it's a bone, and I'm always reluctant with bone because of when they break. And she had a tooth abscess in just after Christmas or just before Christmas, which wasn't nice. And the only other thing she really enjoys chewing is sticks, and then I worry about splinters.
It's really hard, especially for staffies and what we call power chewers, because it's like with my dogs, they've both got very strong jaws. I can't give them like a rope toy to play with because they destroy it in seconds. And I have to say, I really don't think there is any such thing as an indestructible dog toy. If there is, I haven't found it yet. But you know, I mean, bones are okay. Raw bones are okay as long as you don't give them too often. There is always the risk with anything hard like that, with a raw bone, with an antler or anything like that. There's always the risk of a tooth fracture, which, you know, is all, you know, is when they're chewing something really hard like that, you've always got the risk that they may fracture a tooth or damage a tooth. Buffalo horns are quite good. They're not quite as hard as an antler because they're hollow, but they do take quite a lot of chewing. Or you can get now like artificial sticks. They look like sticks and they are for dogs to chew, but they don't splinter like normal sticks.
Okay.
You can get artificial sticks like that they can chew on.
Because Molly loves chewing sticks.
Yeah. So look at maybe getting her an artificial stick. You should be able to get them, you know, I mean, you'll be able to get them online, but you'd definitely be able to get them from a good pet shop. And, you know, that you get rid of the splinter risk then, but it's the same as them chewing a stick if she likes that kind of thing. I find buffalo horns work well with my dogs. They really like those.
Okay, I'll try and get hold of some buffalo horns because I have to be mindful with Molly because anything, you know, like the sow's ears and stuff like that, anything it's no good because she just tries to swallow it whole. You know, so you just like, you know, anything that has that kind of like I know that there's sometimes controversy because they're bleached and stuff like that, but if I try and give her any form of edible chew, it doesn't matter how big it is, she tries to swallow it, and I've had to pull things out of her mouth because they're that big, they're choking her. Because she's just like, I'll just see if I can swallow it, and so I have to. Even if I give her a dentist stick, I have to cut it into pieces, otherwise she'll try and swallow it whole. She won't chew it.
It's like, how fast can I eat this?
yeah. It's more like watching a catfish when they try and just suck up whatever they've noticed below their mouth. And if I give her a dentist stick, and I don't now because the risks, you know, like I've physically had to pull them out of her throat, is because she will try, she's not chewing it, she's trying to break it into a piece. And you can see her just trying to actually crush it in such a way that she can turn it around and swallow it. And it's just like, no.
Have you tried her with, so one of the other things that you could
hence a lick mat.
Yeah, is rabbit's ears. Have you tried rabbit's ears?
I've not, no.
Because if you buy rabbit's ears, it sounds awful, but if you buy rabbit's ears, they've usually still got the fur on them.
Okay.
And they do have to chew those and work really hard. And I think because they're quite big, she'd probably struggle to try and swallow that whole. So it might be worth. I mean, she might succeed. It sounds like she's going to give it a good go.
Well, this is the problem. It's not just that she tries to swallow things whole. It's that she doesn't succeed, and it's then caught in her throat, and I have to physically put my hand in her mouth and hope I can pull it out because it's physically choking her. So you can't like give her something, and like if you give her anything that she might swallow whole, you actually have to watch. The only thing she's good with is sticks and bones. For whatever reason, she doesn't try to swallow them. Even when like she eats a bone all the way down to the knuckle, she doesn't try to swallow it. She'll just eventually leave the knuckle alone.
Yeah, I'd go for a buffalo horn because they're not as hard because they are hollow, so they're not as hard as a bone or an antler.
Yeah.
So you've got less risk of tooth damage, but they are, there's no way she could, because they're quite big. There's no way she'd be able to swallow that. So it might be worth trying that. But yeah, mental stimulation definitely is the way to go. And like I say, there's lots of different things that you can do that are really cheap, that you can make at home, that don't have to be expensive. And the dogs love it. They really enjoy it.
As the dog gets older, what sort of things should people start looking for in terms of their care?
So I think you need to start, certainly nutrition is something you need to pay a lot of attention to, because as I say, because their kidneys start to be less efficient, they can't break down and process protein as well. So you need to be looking to make sure you've got them on a diet that has got a high quality protein, but not a high quantity of protein, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So you want a good quality protein. So you want proper meat, not meat derivatives. But also you want to get some carbohydrate in there as well. So things like, obviously, as I say, good quality meat, but eggs, fish, but then you could mix it with some rice or some pasta or some good quality carbs. But certainly be aware of, if you are buying them a prepared food, whether it be a kibble, whether it be a wet food, make sure that you understand what's in it and the quantity of protein and what makes up that protein, because that's really, really important. But it's things, so I think that's important. I think another thing that people tend to not consider when dogs get older is their grooming regime.
Yes.
So, your dog may, depending on your breed of dog, but they may go to a groomer's every 8 to 10 weeks and have, and be fully clipped off. And that may take a couple of hours. But as they get older, that's a long time for them to stand on a grooming table. And if a dog is starting to suffer a little bit from dementia, that's going to be very, very stressful for them. So you might want to start working with your groomer to look at doing that slightly differently. So it might be that you take them in one day for the bath and the dry, and they perhaps go back a couple of days later to be clipped off. Or maybe you just take them in more regularly so that actually their coat hasn't grown as much, therefore it's a much quicker process. So instead of taking them every 8 to 10 weeks and it taking 2 hours, perhaps you take them every 4 to 5 weeks and it only takes just over an hour and a quarter. So thinking about, changing their routines to accommodate their requirements, rather than, well, they've always been groomed every 8 weeks, and but that's a long time for a dog to stand still, and especially a dog that's perhaps got arthritis or they've got sore joints of any, some sort, or like I say, they've got a bit of doggy dementia. Then that's a lot for them to cope with in one go. Thinking about what time of day you can have your grooming appointment. If your dog is a little bit stiff and a little bit sore, you probably want to take them to be groomed fairly early in the day so that they haven't got all the stresses of the day and being, pottering around all day, building up before they then have to go and stand on a grooming table. So little things like that can really help them to cope as well by adjusting their routine and adjusting the structure. But if you've got a groomer that you've got a good partnership with, they'll be more than happy to talk through a new plan for your dog and how best to accommodate that.
Here's one that won't apply to everybody, but it applies in my house. What's the best way, or what would you suggest I start thinking about when Molly can no longer jump onto the furniture?
Ramps. You can buy little ramps, or you could make one. But yeah, just a little ramp that she can walk up to get up onto the sofa. My dogs are on the sofa. They're...
But you know what I mean, don't you? There's two types of dog owners. There's dog owners where, probably like you and I, where we live in the dog's house and we're grateful for that. And there's dog people that their dogs live in specific areas and they never leave the floor.
Yeah, I'm definitely in first camp.
So am I too.
Yeah, ramps are the easiest way to go, to be honest. Be careful with stairs as they get older, because they do struggle with stairs. That's quite a difficult one. If your dog does come upstairs and sleep with you, if they're small enough for you to carry them up the stairs, then great. If not, you need to kind of try and make sure that they take the stairs really slowly. So just allow them more time to get up the stairs. Bit like us, really. We struggle to get up the stairs as we get older. They're going to struggle to get up the stairs.
Yeah, no, Molly does come upstairs. In fact, the only problem I have with Molly when it comes to stairs is in the morning, because she knows she's going to get fed. She gets excited. And I have to make sure I walk in front of her, because she started getting overexcited, and she would start trying to run down the stairs. And where her little Staffordshire legs don't quite connect properly, she then took a tumble a couple of times and just landed at the bottom of the stairs. And I was like, God, this is going to cost a fortune in vet bills. Because she did like 3 or 4 times. She's tumbled down the stairs just where she's got excited, and she kind of revs herself up and then just flies down the stairs. And it's even if she's, sometimes you get to the top of the stairs, she'll have a little scratch and stuff before I have to wait for her or call her, but because I can't let her get excited, because she will charge down the stairs and her legs just aren't big enough. And she then actually physically tumbles, and she doesn't care when she hits the bottom. She just like shakes it off and goes running into the kitchen and just sits there like, come on, mate, breakfast time.
Yeah, it's really strange actually, because one of my dogs, Mabel, although she is only 5, she does have arthritis in her hips already. So I'm very careful with her with the stairs, and we've actually got stair gates so that she can come upstairs, but only when I'm with her and I can control it.
Yeah.
So it's not open for her to decide to wander up the stairs on her own. It's only when I'm there and I can control the pace that she goes up or she comes down. So we have stair gates there so that we can manage how often she's going up the stairs and things. But yeah, I mean, when it comes to furniture, ramps are the easiest thing to do.
I have a friend who has a dachshund, and she has like it's like a sponge stairway, and it's just tiny little steps, and it's so her dachshund can climb up onto the sofa. And not, because apparently there's something about if they jump, they can risk hurting their back quite bad.
Yeah, because they've got such long backs. They're actually, I mean, the technical term for it is they're achondroplastic, which basically means they've got really long backs.
Yeah.
And that means that they can actually, if they jump, can actually seriously damage their spine. So yeah, dogs like that do need to be able to have some assistance up and down. It's like, and also thinking about, going back to sort of older dogs as well, you might want a ramp to get them into the car. If you're at the car, you might want to use a ramp then, because again, jumping up and down from the boot can be really painful and sore for them if they've got sore joints. So yeah, ramps are the way to go.
Are there anything we should consider in terms of like body temperature?
The only thing really, I think, to think about is obviously when it's cold and it's damp, they're going to be more stiff if they've got arthritis. So you may have a dog that perhaps you've never really needed to put a coat on them before, but as they get older, you might want to start putting a coat on them, trying to keep those areas that if they have got sort of arthritis in their hips, making sure you've got a coat that's long enough that keeps their hips warm. If it's raining, make sure that you put a coat on them to try and keep them dry. But indoors, because we all live in majority of people now live in centrally heated houses, and dogs are living indoors.
Yeah.
Actually, there shouldn't really be any need for any adjustments indoors with regard to their temperature. But it's more about when you go out with them, making sure that they can be kept warm when they're out for the walk.
Would there be any, I suppose there's the cognitive issues, but would you expect to see any changes in behaviour? Yeah,
you can. I mean, any dog that is in pain can change their behaviour. So it might be that you don't realise that they're in pain, but they might suddenly get a little bit snappy. Or perhaps a dog that's going deaf, and you might not realize they're going deaf. You might find that actually you go and touch them when they're sleeping on the sofa or something, and suddenly they're startled and they might snap or growl, but that's because you've startled them. All of those are little indications that, if they haven't always been like that, that perhaps something's a little bit off. Or, even things like, if a dog is feeling a little bit stiff and sore, they just might not want to come out of their bed in the morning.
Yeah, we all know that one.
They might be a bit slower to get up in the morning, or they might be a bit more reluctant to go out for a walk, whereas normally they're at the door wanting to go for a walk. Suddenly they just don't seem very interested in going for a walk. And things, as I mentioned earlier, to look out for when you're actually walking them is, are they getting left behind? Are they sitting down a lot? Are they suddenly developing these imaginary itches where they have to keep sitting down and scratching? All of those are signs that potentially they're tired, or they've got some pain or discomfort. But certainly dogs that are in pain, you will see behavioural changes. And I think sometimes people kind of just go, oh, he's old and grumpy. He may be old and grumpy, but there may also be some pain or discomfort going on underneath, and you really should get that investigated, rather than just assume he's old and grumpy. Because you've got something else leading to that. If dogs go off their food, that should be a bit of a red flag, really, especially if it's a dog that's always liked their food.
I'm guessing as well, there should be, it's knowing as well when to start reducing their portions, isn't it?
And I think if you think about, there's a lot of similarities. If you think about people as they get older and going to their senior years, they perhaps can't eat big meals anymore. They like to have little meals, or they like to graze, and almost like, I think you go from with a sort of a parent and a child relationship, it kind of reverts in senior age, so that the child almost becomes the parent, if that makes sense. It's a similar thing with dogs. In terms of, when you get a puppy, you're feeding them 4 or 5 times a day, small meals 4 or 5 times a day. You gradually reduce that as they get a bit older. But then as they start to enter their senior years, you probably want smaller portions, but you want to be feeding them more often again. So you could be going back to 3 or 4 meals a day with an older dog, as opposed to 2 larger meals a day. So it's kind of almost, you revert to a lot of the stuff you did when they were a puppy. As they get older, you revert back to those kind of things again, letting them out to the toilet more often, because they may not have quite so much control over their bladder as they get older, and therefore don't wait for them to ask to go out, because they might not make it to the door, if that makes sense. So actively taking them out more often to go to the toilet, as you do when they're a puppy, to toilet train them. So it's kind of like you almost revert back a bit to those kind of patterns as they get old.
Okay, so so that'd be something to be aware of then, isn't it? If you come down, you notice the dog's been to the toilet a couple of times, and it's like, oh, okay, this is an unusual behaviour. It could be a sign that they're actually just starting to get a bit older and need to more frequently.
It could be that they've got they could have a urinary tract infection, so you want to get it checked by the vet to make sure there's nothing going on physically with their health. But as long as there's nothing going on physically with their health, then it just means that you've got to think about readjusting their routine and readjusting their schedule to help them to deal with it. Dogs that get very restless as well, if you've got an older dog that seems to be a bit vacant sometimes and just stands and stares, but also they struggle to settle at night, they pace a lot, or they maybe get a little bit vocal at night, that is a sign of cognitive dysfunction. So that's definitely worth getting checked out if you notice they're a lot more unsettled at night. But again, there are things that you can do to help them to settle. So keeping them to a routine is really important if they've got cognitive dysfunction. But also things like, you can give them, before they go to bed, you can give them porridge and make it with water, not milk, but you can give them a little bowl of porridge. That helps them to settle. You can give dogs decaffeinated green tea. So you can make them a cup of green tea, obviously let it cool down a bit, but it needs to be decaffeinated. But green tea is full of antioxidants, and antioxidants are really good for getting rid of a lot of the natural toxins that build up in the brain.
Yep.
Feeding them things like blueberries, again, antioxidants. So there's lots and lots of different things that you can do to support them before they get old, but then as they inevitably do age and things don't work quite as well as they used to.
I'll have to do that with blueberries. I've not tried Molly because I have blueberries every day. I've not tried them on Molly.
Yeah, blueberries. Some dogs love them and some dogs aren't interested. Being a staffy, she'll eat them because they eat anything.
Because it's just food.
Yeah, she'll eat them. But yeah, blueberries are really good for them as they get older.
What indications should people look for when, if you're able to say actually, when you start to notice their sight going? How would you notice their sight going?
It's quite difficult. I mean, you'll notice things like they may be a little bit more reluctant to go places on their own. So they may be a little bit more reluctant to walk around the house on their own. Okay. They might want to stick really close to you because they're aware that they can't see so well, so they lose confidence a little bit. You might notice that they startle easier. So perhaps if you're out for a walk and you meet another dog, it might startle them a bit more if this dog comes up and sniffs because they don't see it coming. There are certain conditions that dogs have in their eyes where their eyes will go really cloudy and really milky, but actually it doesn't affect their vision. Their vision is still good, but it's mainly cataracts. If they get developed cataracts, then they will lose their sight. But definitely if you notice that they're either bumping into things or they just seem less confident to do anything unless they're stuck right by your side, then definitely worth getting a vet check on their eyes to make sure their eyes are okay.
Okay. And just kind of finally, just sort of to finish up, where can people find you again and for resources and information?
So a couple of places really. You can go onto my website, which is www.pause-and-play.com. There's lots of information on there. There's also one of the little buttons that you can click on there is e-learning. And if you click on there, there's lots of different courses. I think I've got 6 different courses around senior dogs that people can pick and mix depending on what they're interested, in particularly learning about. So you can go on there and have a look, or my Facebook page, which is Pause and Play. And if you put, I think when you search, if you put @K, the letter K and the number 9, healthcare with no space, then that'll bring up my Pause and Play Facebook page, and I post things on there as well. So either of those places, or people can just contact me directly if they want to.
Perfect. And I could definitely vouch for Facebook because I'm always following you on Facebook. So.
Excellent, thank you.
No.
And now you know to let Molly sniff.
Yeah, like I said, I do. Since I seen the posts that you were putting up, I became much more aware, not so much of how much she sniffed, but how much I was interrupting it. And was when I would be, and it's just impatience because I want to keep walking, and it kind of reminded me like a parent with a toddler. It's just like a 2-minute walk to the car down the driveway turns into a half an hour game. And yeah, so I just haven't seen those posts. I then suddenly was like, okay, you just got to let us sniff and not try to put a time limit on it.
Bless her.
But that's absolutely brilliant. Thank you very much as always for your time, and I will post that up, put all the links in the description, and hopefully we'll have an opportunity to chat again soon.
Yeah, I'd love to. Thank you very much. Thank you.
And that was me talking to Bridget. If you'd like to get in touch with her, please do. She's a wealth of knowledge, and I'll make sure the links are in the description. And as always, thank you very much for listening. Please do like, comment and subscribe. But above all else, take care of yourself. Thank you.